This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Coragen Max insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. And Coragen Max insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Sean Haney, your host here on this Wednesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is April 1st. Be careful out there, everybody. Keep your heads up. If you're like me, you got some friends that are they extend it and they try to get you all day. So keep our heads up there. Stay on alert. And remember, it is April 1st. So you should take everything with a grain of salt on any given day. Today, especially, for sure. We got a special program for you here today on this midweek edition of the show because it is Wednesday. Friday is Good Friday. Okay. And so we are going to have a show for you on Friday. Today is going to be a RealAg Issues Panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner standing by. And we will have a full show tomorrow, the Farmer Rapid Fire. But today we're going to have a RealAg Issues Panel. We're also going to hear from Jason McGillivray of Scoular. We're going to talk about what's going on in the hybrid rye market from a marketing perspective. So we'll get all of that here today as well. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. I also want to mention that one of our we got some sad news this week. Justin Funk, our partner in the market research arm of RealAgriculture, RealAg Studies, his father, Dr. Tom Funk, passed away on Sunday. And our thoughts and condolences and prayers go out to the Funk family. Dr. Funk had an immense impact on agriculture in Canada and abroad. He was a respected professor emeritus at the University of Guelph. Tom dedicated over 35 years to teaching agricultural marketing in the Ontario Agricultural College, OAC, and the Department of Consumer Studies at both undergrad and grad levels. He was also the founding director of the MBA in Agriculture program. He helped shape the future of the sector. Tom also held adjunct faculty positions at his alma mater, Purdue University in Indiana, and at the Ivy Business School at Western University. He was an inspiring educator. Tom was beloved by his students and colleagues alike, leaving a profound and lasting influence on countless lives. Also a very, very passionate golfer as well. So really our thoughts, and like I said, our condolences to the Funk family. And Tom Funk passed away on Sunday. Many of you will have taken his courses, participated in his seminars, his learning opportunities, and Justin carries on that Funk family tradition in that business. But Dr. Tom Funk will definitely be remembered with very high regard on his contribution to the industry of agriculture and Canada. Take a break. We come back. We're going to talk about hybrid rye right after this. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
I I'm Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now, Marika Vanderlyn with Syngenta.
If you're still in that spot of that, it's been a rotation crop for me, get to know this crop. Like, it will reward you. Boots on the ground, so important. Make a plan for that planting date. We know, being involved in the yen for a couple of years, that is like your number one thing, is getting that planting date as close to optimal as possible. Something you can still change this year, sulfur. If you're not putting sulfur on your wheat, think about that. And of course, from the Syngenta stacked cereal approach, I'm a big fan of that T1 fungicide. We have two options. We have a lower cost option with Quilt, and we have what I would consider, your Cadillac, just Nervous Neo. Why am I caring about this T1 space? Well, last year we saw stripe rust again, and we've had a similar winter than we had last winter that maybe allowed some stripe rust to overwinter. As we're climbing that yield ladder, we need to protect that crop. We have a beautiful website. Just Google stacked cereals. It will be the first thing that comes up.
Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com. We're going to talk about some of the things that are happening in the hybrid rye market, but we're going to take a different perspective, a different angle. We're going to talk to one of the companies that is buying this product from farmers. Joining us right now is Jason McGillivray. He is the trade unit manager for specialty grains group at Scoular. He's based out of Okotoks, Alberta. Jason, it's great to chat with you.
Yes, it's great. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you getting tired of winter yet? You ready for spring?
Yes, I think everybody kind of feels that way. It seems to be a bit of a roller coaster all winter, and it continues even to today. So
yeah. So before we get into what's going on in the rye market, what I'd like to do is maybe make sure that we've introduced the entire RealAg Radio audience and Real Agriculture audience to Scoular. Who is Scoular? And some of the markets that you serve and your role in the grain value chain. Right.
Okay. Well, Scoular is kind of a unique company, I kind of think, when I look at all the different grain companies in North America. We're now about a 134-year-old private agribusiness company. We encompass a lot of different areas. So you can think of us as a grain trader and merchandising company, but also we have close to 100 grain facilities in North America, and we're involved in the grain business, the feed business, and food ingredients as well, different supply chains and manufacturing, etc. So not a one-dimensional company by any means, and that's we pride ourselves on that, the diversification.
So that specialty side of the business, like what's all inside of that? Obviously rye, but there's other stuff too.
Yeah, so inside of that, we kind of think of it as more. Yeah, I guess it kind of speaks for itself as far as specialty or niche market commodities. But some of the things within that group would be, say, organics or non-GMO commodities, or like our group. That kind of segues right into the group that I kind of manage, and that would be a business unit within Scoular that focuses primarily, I'd say the vast majority of our business volumes and revenue is around supplying grain to the North American distilling industry, which in and itself is a unique business focus. And within that, obviously, the commodity mix would primarily be rye, corn, wheat, for us as the commodities that we're typically buying and supplying to these end users across North America. So that in and itself is kind of, in a nutshell, the specialty grain group and what we do within there.
On 25 crop, what's the rye market been like? What's, from a pricing perspective and movement?
Yeah, so 25, we had a big crop. That was kind of the start of this whole, the year, as we had acreage was up 30% maybe from 2024. Mother Nature was kind to us, and we had an above average yielding and production across North America. So we were dealt a crop size that was, sub 1 million tons, but not that far off of it. And that's a large crop when it comes to rye in North America. And if you rewind the clock, maybe, 2, 3, 4 years prior to that, we were producing probably half of that amount. So in a nutshell, in 2025, we had a big crop. And the interesting part about this is the time. If I can just rewind a little bit, the demand for rye in North America going back to 2020 was starting to increase. The North American distilling industry was leading the charge with regards to that demand. And the whiskey and bourbon industry was growing, on fire, you could say. Yeah. You're seeing really strong growth. Going through the COVID period, there was a lot of demand, and that was signaling the producers of whiskey and bourbon to produce more. The market signals were there. So we saw a really strong demand pull for rye into the distilling industry from 2020 to about 2024. So what that did is it drove increased production of whiskey and bourbon, new distilleries getting built, new contract distilleries getting built. Ultimately, and that was driving the demand. The price was higher for rye at that time, and that's what drove the acreage increase and the production increase going into 2024. So fast forward to 2024, things have changed going into 25 and now into 26. And what that, really, you look at the distilling industry, things started to change from a consumer trend perspective. We started to see people drinking a little less. Yeah. We started to see, a bit of a change. So that's a consumer trend change, but also overproduction. I think a lot of the distilling industry started to realize that there was a lot of production. There was a lot of barrels in rickhouses aging. And so they started to slow down. And then the trifecta of all of this was a lot of the geopolitical challenges that caused trade barriers and tariffs into export markets for American whiskey and bourbon. So all of those things kind of came full storm here in 2025. And ultimately, that's impacted the demand for rye into the distilling industry itself. And right now, that industry is going through a very massive correction, a big drop in production, and therefore a big drop in the demand for rye. So what you got there is you got a big crop produced, and now one of the biggest the market drivers in North America for rye, the demand is down over 50%. So that has pushed prices lower to the farmer here in Western Canada for the last 8 months. And I think we're finally starting to see the stabilization of that market, but it's going to be a bit of time yet before I think we see things start to grow again with regards to the demand into that sector.
So most of the provinces, I think, still have some sort of restriction on American alcohol. Yes. In some roundabout way, that's actually hurt the Canadian rye grower.
Yes, it sure has. It sure has. I think there's still only 2 provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta, that are putting U.S. spirits on the shelf. So although Canada, for whiskey and bourbon, American whiskey and bourbon, if you look at the numbers, Canada is a smaller portion of the export market. Europe would be the biggest driver. It's still very much impactful to them. And so, it's definitely impacting the market. Like I said, there's not just one negative thing.
Right.
There's 3 negative things that are kind of impacting the market all at the same time.
Okay, so those are the barriers, the deterrents. Yeah. Are there growth opportunities?
Yeah. I think that's one thing that we've learned through this. Like when we were through 2020 and 2024, I kind of used the adage that we were drinking from a fire hose. Like we were scrambling to buy rye. We were importing rye from Europe into the U.S. just to satisfy the demand in the whiskey and bourbon industry. And so some of the other markets, the potential markets, were kind of put on the back burner. And ultimately, I think we did ourselves a disservice a little bit at that time. But the reality was that's where the focus was. But now you fast forward to where we are today, and we have a larger crop. We're expecting a fairly large carryout, and so we needed to turn and diversify our business and start trying to do a lot more market development for rye into other areas and in other supply chains. So that led us to working a lot closer with some of the feedlots in the Lethbridge area and different areas, with also with ethanol producers across Western Canada. And so we really saw it took some time. That's not an easy thing just to switch rations. The price has to be right. Nutritionists need to kind of figure out what they can use and what the limitations are and different things. But over the course of the last year, I think we've done a fairly successful job of getting more rye for the Canadian farmer moved into other markets like the cattle feed, hog producers, ethanol plants, and also we're putting a lot of time on the development of our business supplying rye into the U.S. cover crop market.
Oh, interesting.
So, and then you can't forget about flour mills. Flour mills are still using rye, albeit it's flat kind of demand over the last 5 years, and it's limited. It's probably the smallest of all the markets for rye, but it's important. So when you get all of those going at the same time, that provides a lot more liquidity. And that provides a lot more movement and just opportunity for marketing for farmers. And that's what we need. And so our goal here at Scoular and working with good partners like KWS is to try to get a stable, consistent and growing amount of rye acres and rye produced in Western Canada, because it's a chicken and the egg type of thing. You got to have the bushels. You got to develop the markets for it. Once you do, you have more marketability and basically more stable prices for the grower and stable movement for the product, which is also important.
Yeah. So would you describe at this point, you said it's taken a while, but getting rye accepted at the feed yard level, of course, like that area where I grew up, Picture Butte, Alberta, that's the feedlot capital of Canada. Yeah. There's a lot of head-on feed in that area from a North American perspective. Have you had success in getting some market penetration into that market?
Yes, we have. I think there's a long ways to go. I think there's still a perception at times. There's a perception of the fact that maybe there isn't enough supply that'll last. Like a lot of guys won't want to switch their ration just for 2 or 3 months. They want this amount of time. They got to be set up properly to handle another commodity. And ultimately, I think those are the things. But to answer your question, yes, we've had success. And when you get one good sized feed yard using it, even if it's at a 20% kind of inclusion, it's really good volume. And if you can get 2 or 3 or 4, then you're really humming. And that's what our goal is. So we've scratched the surface. We've got that market penetration. We're also moving it into other sectors, like I've mentioned. And again, the magic is when you can get all of these things happening at once. And that truly creates the liquidity and the movement and the ultimately supports the price.
A broader set of marketing opportunities and end uses. The more breadth that's there, the better it is longer term. As we see the distillery go down, the other one goes up. Like it provides a little bit more balance from a demand standpoint. Now, if they all cook at the same time, then we're rolling. We're having a different conversation. But
exactly.
From a grower perspective, I guess where's the growers' role in there? Just keep on producing, or is there things that they can do to make their grain easier to move? Based on where some of the marketing opportunities are right now, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's important. Like I believe that it's important. It doesn't matter the commodity that you produce. You got to know what you produce. You got to have a good idea of the quality of that grain. You got to have a solid, sound marketing plan. And ultimately you got to help yourself. You can't just put your head in the sand and come up 8 months later and expect to move it. It's not rye. The rye market and rye is still very much, I consider it a niche market. And so you have to be engaged with the buyers. I think one thing I'd like to say about Scoular is we've been trading and merchandising rye for 20 years. We've really put the pedal down probably 5 to 7 years ago and really put a lot more focus and attention to it because we found the opportunity there, and we wanted to continue to focus on it. So we're a buyer 12 months of the year every year. There's some others that may just only be active in the market when there's a lot of bushels around and there's opportunity, and then they're out of it the next year. That's one thing, there's very few of us out there in Western Canada that are in it year in and year out and focus on it year in and year out. So to all your listeners out there, I would encourage you to connect with us, and we can continue to feed you with market information that's key, because the rye is another thing that just doesn't get talked about enough. And you don't know, you don't hear, you don't see it on daily wires from other grain companies. There's just no market information. Is hard to get. And I would encourage growers out there to talk to us. We'll continue to give you that information, and ultimately start to use other tools that are out there. One of the tools I use personally is Sanoa from GrainFox, the AI tool. And you'd be shocked at the information you can pull nowadays in a concise fashion about something that's the information scattered amongst 20 or 30 different articles, and it pulls it into one and makes it very much concise. And you can learn a lot really fast. So I encourage people to, try some of that stuff.
Yeah, very interesting. So 26 crop is in the ground, right?
Yes.
We fall planted it.
Yeah.
What does it look like for acres?
Acres are going to be down. We're expecting right now acres to be down around 25 to 30%. So back to where they would have been 2 years ago. We're expecting the carryout of rye this year to be much larger than it had been for previous years. So ultimately, if you just assume an average production for 2026, we're still going to have a healthy amount of rye. The interesting part about that is I believe as you move out of 2026 and into 2027, all depending on the demand overall for that time frame, I think that's where we'll start to see the S&D tighten up a little bit more. Okay. So it may, it'll be interesting to see how things develop come fall of 26 and what price signals we can provide the farmer to encourage some more acres to go back in the ground in the fall of 26. And hopefully Mother Nature is good to us, and the crop conditions and soil conditions are good, and harvest was early enough to allow that window for the grower to get that crop in the ground here in 26.
Are there, just jump back to the marketing for a second,
Sure.
And maybe I'm asking, just blind questions here, but is it like a cash price where it's like, hey, here, is there forward contracting available? Like, how does this market work? It's not like a canola or a corn market where there's a lot more liquidity that is out there. So is this more like a lentil as opposed to like canola?
It's somewhere in it's somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
That's how I would describe it today. It is a flat price traded commodity. It's not a hedgeable commodity. So in itself, it's more like a pulse crop or a barley or something where it's really, there's no hedging mechanism for it. So you got to consider that. But we, again, a company like ourselves that is involved in the rye market to the degree we're comfortable contracting rye further out. We frankly encourage it. I would say at times there's still liquidity challenges, and where you'll go from having bids to no bids. But that's pretty rare nowadays for us. We typically have bids unless we're full, unless we kind of have all the grain we need bought. We always have bids out at least a year, if not 18 months. And I'll be honest with you, quite often, and again, this is a bit historical now, but distilleries, their natural buying habit would be buying at least a year out. That's changed a lot recently with all the dynamics in the distilling industry where they're more hand to mouth now. But that doesn't stop us because we can manage the risk and we have other markets to move the rye to. So we typically are buying further out and encouraging farmers to hedge a portion of their crop further out, i.e. new crop, before the crop is produced.
When we do have that whether it's for rye or for other crops, when we do have that sustained demand where we do have procurers of the crop, Scoular's customers saying, I know I'm going to need X amount of tons in, these months going, a year or more out. They're trying to manage their cost of goods.
Yeah.
And it also gives signals to the farmer in terms of where we need to be from a production standpoint, especially when we're dealing with a winter crop where we're really forecasting out, right? It's not like plant in spring, harvest in July or August. We're planting in the fall, late August into September. So it's even a wider window here. So the more sustained demand that we can have tells me that it's more of a signal to the farmer.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people like us to have bids further out. It shows transparency. It gives the producer an idea of what that he can lock in for next year before he puts the crop in the ground and makes that decision. They can look at their returns per acre and make a decision whether they think it's something they want to do. So it helps us encourage acres if we're providing that forward pricing. So,
and Jason, we see this. It also works for the purchaser too, right? Because I'm sure when you're working in specialty area of Scoular, you see this a lot where procurer drags their feet, and then they've got like, oh, you know what? We're going to pull the trigger. We need, X amount of thousands of metric tons.
Sure.
And I need it like in 2 weeks. And you're like, no, that's not how this sort of works. We got to, farmers plant at a certain time, and we're way past that. When you know what I mean? Like, it's probably an educate. We've talked a lot about from the grower standpoint here, marketing. I'm sure there's a lot of education that has to happen also with the procurers as well.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. We're always learning. And the interesting thing about the rye market again is in North America, we might produce 5 to 8% of the global rye production. So that's always something to consider. The vast majority of the world, or the rye in the world, is produced in Europe, and that is an important price driver too, because that rye from Europe, when it's priced accordingly or cheap enough, it'll be imported into the United States, and that will dictate kind of the price that you can pay for rye back in Western Canada even. So it's an interesting part of, but it always kind of lingers because it can kind of cap how high the rye price could really run, because there's an importation dynamic there that would, change the demand ultimately.
Pesky Europeans. Is there any differences? Like in wheat, we would talk about the quality of wheat produced in different regions. Is there any difference from end use perspective from the buyers when they look at different regions, who's producing rye from where?
That's an interesting question. We get it a lot. I would say ultimately no. Today, it doesn't matter which end use market we're looking at. Primarily, they don't distinguish between open pollinated varieties or hybrid varieties. There's been a lot of work from distilleries, for example, going into R&D on trying to find the right flavor profiles, the right varieties that have the right flavors and grown in the right regions. But I wouldn't say there's any real, definitive answer on that today. What I can tell you, though, is what we've seen over the last number of years is more producers starting to grow hybrids versus older OP varieties. And ultimately, those varieties have improved over the years. And what that's done is it's improved yield and production. It's improved ultimately the quality of the rye from a falling number perspective to lower ergot in that rye, which always helps the marketability of that product into other markets. So, I think OP rye, Hazlitt rye, for example, which is a popular variety, it still has its place in certain spots. But we certainly encourage the hybrid varieties because it's a win-win from a quality and a production standpoint, and ultimately it increases your marketability of that grain, and so that's important.
And we've talked about this before. Whenever we talk about fall seeded crops, is also the cover story of it. Getting some ground cover on your fields in the fall also has a benefit as from an agronomic standpoint as well.
Yeah, well, I find it interesting, like you had mentioned to me earlier, you were in Ames, Iowa. I spent some time in Iowa a month ago, and it is a part of our business that we continue to look at. We see it using rye for a cover crop in the upper Midwest of the United States is still a big opportunity, especially with some of the developments that could happen with the 45Z tax credit in the United States and it encouraging regenerative agricultural practices in the Midwest. So I see that as a great opportunity and continue. That's going to be a continued focus for us while the distilling industry stabilizes and starts to recover over time. But that's a big boat that turns slowly. So that's something that will get better ultimately in time. But again, if you can get all these markets kind of going at once, I think it's a good perfect storm for producers to continue to put rye in the ground and look forward to good marketing and good prices in the future.
Yeah, cool. Great thoughts. Hey, Jason, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Hey, all the best to you here in 2026, trying to navigate whether it's it's rye or some of the other specialty products that you're working on. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate that market update there from Jason McGillivray of Scoular, talking about what's going on in the North American rye market. Lots of considerations for the 2026 marketing plans and intentions, is just how you go about the opportunity for rye. Interesting about the diversification strategy there as well, trying to move out of just talking about distilleries into a broader range, and especially that feed market where I think there's a lot of opportunity indeed. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to get to the RealAg Issues Panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner standing by right after this.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Since 2009, the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has been providing relevant and timely agronomic advice to anyone involved in canola production. With over 15 years of video content on YouTube, the Canola School has been producers' go-to source for canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. The Canola School is brought to you by BASF and InVigor Hybrid Canola. Check us out on YouTube or at canolaschool.com.
As you look ahead to the next growing season, there's a lot to consider when it comes to your crop. You need every possible advantage available to you. The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to make the best choice for you and your farm. On-demand videos with leading industry experts, available anywhere, anytime. Go into the season confident and ready with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on April Fool's Day. We'll see what maybe sidewinders or fibs or just outright lies the panel will tell us today. Joining us is Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. How are you doing today, Lyndsey?
Oh, I'm doing great, and that is the honest truth. I thought about, there was a time where sometimes we would even write stories on Real Agriculture and call it fakeagriculture.com. But I didn't have anything witty. I think I don't know, the world right now seems like enough of nonsense that we're going to stick to the facts today.
Yeah, like how
no shenanigans.
How big of a tale would you have to weave for someone to be like, oh, that's not true?
Yeah, like the Onion and the Beaverton, I think, are seriously getting upset that all of their great headlines are being stolen by Real News.
Right, yeah,
So,
there is
yeah.
that. There definitely is that.
Sorry.
Also joining us here today on this special Wednesday edition of the RealAg Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. How are we doing today, Kelvin?
Doing well here, Sean, as we enter April with a white blanket of snow here in this part of the world, the eastern side of the prairies, maybe wishing that was made up, but that's not the case, as we are, it's a nice picturesque winter scene outside in this part of the world right now.
Yeah, yesterday I was in Turtleford, Saskatchewan, about 2.5 hours northwest of Saskatoon. Very wintry. But, what some of the farmers said there was, yeah, there's a lot of snow around. This is great. But we got to remember, too, it'll switch just like that. And so, we've seen this before. Lots of snow cover. Hey, it's winter, whereas spring, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, spring. So got to be prepared for whatever Mother Nature throws our way. That's kind of what I heard yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Also, I'm surprised Turtleford's team is not named Turtle.
No, why would you want to be a turtle?
Why wouldn't you? It's a fantastic beast.
I don't know.
But anyway, what are they, like the Rockets or something?
No, the Tigers. The Turtleford Tigers.
See, but they go with an alliteration, but not turtles.
Yeah, I was in the race.
Wasn't there a fable where the turtle wins the race, Sean? The turtle wins the race, and
but
I would have gone with turtle.
Okay, just think about it here. You're the coach. You're in the room. You got the boys in front of you, and you're like,
turtles.
Okay, let's go turtles. Let's go get them. No, you're like, we're tigers.
Especially in hockey.
Yeah, especially in hockey. Yeah,
like maybe curling. Like we're the Turtleford Turtle curling team. That makes more sense. Hockey, I don't know if that really fits.
Stones rolling across the ice. Yeah, that could be more turtles. Anyway. Yeah. Well done.
Great to be out there. It's funny. I posted on Instagram about the fact I was in Turtleford, and I so many people like, I played a provincial hockey game there when I was like 12, and somebody else said, the burgers are good in the rink, and stuff like that. So great to hear from everybody.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Lyndsey, what poll do we have up on RealAgriculture.com? Because last week's poll of the Carney situation got a lot of responses. What are we asking about this week?
So not nearly as controversial. We are talking about land prices. So, of course, last week we did get the farmland value report came out. We heard from JP Gervais. We talked about it here on the show, et cetera. And so sort of one of those, like, that was the 2025 report. So where are we at sort of now? So we are asking where land prices seem to be going in your area. Again, this is, just a poll. But the options are up, down, steady, or not much is moving at all. And not much moving at all is actually sitting at 14% of the vote. But land prices seeming to be up is hitting 50%. Now, I will say this is getting, less than half of the votes that the Carney poll did. So there you go. But yes, if you want to weigh in, you can head on over to RealAgriculture.com. You can scroll down the main page. It's there. It's got its own post as well. And if you're on the radio page, it shows up there too. So lots of ways to weigh in. Or, of course, you can always just message us and let us know what you think.
Yeah, yesterday when we were talking politics during my speech, I had one farmer point out that they were disappointed that we started with a 1 because he would have given a 0. So just some
sorry
feedback,
about that, guys.
Some feedback to the RealAg pollster makers. Like,
that's my. I guess that's my side gig now. Is I am the RealAg pollster.
Yes,
and I use the term very loosely. So there you go. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this week, Kelvin, we got some. I think some good news. Politicians in Saskatchewan, Alberta are celebrating. We have a reversal on the use of strychnine to take care of gophers, but there are some buts to this story. So what exactly is the reality of the announcement yesterday when it came to strychnine use?
We're still trying to figure that out, I would say. The devil's in the details here, as yes, a couple of years ago, the federal government banned strychnine use for gophers and other uses across the country. The Saskatchewan and Alberta governments back in fall submitted an emergency use registration request, and that was rejected in February, which we covered on Real Agriculture and here on the radio show. And as of this week, the health and agriculture ministers have approved an updated application from Alberta and Saskatchewan for the use of strychnine to control gophers, or Richardson ground squirrels, technically, not gophers, which have caused immense damage to farmland, chewing up digging holes, damaging pasture and cropland, and especially in areas where it's been dry. And so there is this tool that's back for the next 2 years. It's emergency use registration for up until November 2027. And there is a geographic limitation on where it is approved to be used. So there's actually 7 crop districts in Saskatchewan. It's not nearly the whole province of Saskatchewan where it's approved to be used. Alberta, it's a little bit broader. It's most of the central and southern parts of the province where it's approved. We still don't have a lot of details, though, on the requirements and what the reporting process is going to be like. The Saskatchewan government has said that there will be increased monitoring, that there is a carcass collection and disposal requirement aspect to this, as well as some mandatory training. We're not sure what that will look like, and we don't seem to be getting a lot of answers right now when we're asking the different levels of government for further information. So I'm not sure whether it's not ready or what the issue is there, but there are some details to still be communicated here. And I think, in general, it will be back on the market. I'm not sure how well they'll be able to track or limit, enforce where it's used. So that's the thing. As soon as stores start selling this stuff, there will be demand for it. And so whether it stays in those lines or not, I guess we have to be. That'll be determined by how extensive this reporting process and the enforcement around it will be.
Yeah, when I look at the maps, the Alberta one seems a lot more simple. The Saskatchewan is a little bit more of a scatter plot.
And,
I don't know how to.
Yeah. And it's right up to the Saskatchewan-Alberta border in Alberta, but then you get onto the Saskatchewan side, and it's not approved on the Saskatchewan side of that border. And so, yeah, it's a thing though where I'm not sure how they will police it in terms of where it actually gets deployed.
Right, and so the map, of course, because we've published this story, so Kelvin got the story out, and lots of feedback coming in. And
quick like a bunny. Not a turtle, a bunny.
That's right, not a turtle. When you look at the map, though, everyone's like, why? And so they based it off of essentially claims for Richardson ground squirrel damage, as well as balancing species at risk, et cetera, is the explanation we got for Saskatchewan. But I mean, it's really difficult to, like, gophers don't care about a municipal line or whatever. So it really does beg the question, like, how effective is saying, certain municipalities and not others as well? And I don't know. I mean, realistically, when it comes to here in Ontario, like, there's certain pest control products you have to have a pesticide applicator's license for, et cetera, whatever. But, like, other than that, it's just, okay, you sign off on it, you got it, and away you go. It just seems like a very expensive way to allow access to a tool. So I don't know. I understand farmers' frustration in Saskatchewan, especially, where you might be in the wrong municipality.
Yeah, I got a text from a RealAg listener, very upset about the Saskatchewan map and trying to make sense of it, saying major Sask provincial failure, only getting strychnine for some parts of the province, major cattle regions denied emergency use abilities, and yet politicians declaring this as a win and handing out high fives. I see Premier Mo's RM gets it approved. This has further picked winners and losers in the ag space. This entire west side of Saskatchewan is denied access, while the entire east edge of Alberta is given emergency access. Real comedic. I think we're going to hear a lot about, appreciate that text. I think we're going to hear lots of people upset from that perspective. To have some fun with it. I would love to hear your most inventive way of trying to control gophers on your farm. That would be really interesting. I promise I will not tell anybody who you are if you send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. So I guess, Kelvin, is this, or maybe Lyndsey, is this a win then for ag? Should we be pleased that CFIA has reversed this and maybe found some middle ground? Or sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
PMRA. Health Canada.
Under Health Canada, which CFIA is also under Health Canada.
Appreciate. There we go. Kelvin's back to normal, Lyndsey. He's correcting.
He's correcting you.
Should we see this as a compromise and the fact maybe a showcase that they're listening, or hey, we shouldn't have been in this situation in the first place?
That is a very loaded question, because I think as you unpack it, I think you can probably put some things in one column and then the other, and then you have to decide. And obviously, as evidenced by the Carney poll, I'm terrible at making that 0 to 5, I guess, is what I was supposed to do. So it is a point, though, in that, this is a government that is exactly that, sort of celebrating, like, hey, look at this great thing we did, giving, emergency access to something we took away. So, on one hand, it sort of feels like, let's maybe simmer down the celebration part. At the same time, this is a different government, same departments, but there's always people that move, whatever. I think what I'm maybe most struck by is no one's saying every announcement has to be like confetti and a parade. Like, you can just make decisions or reverse positions on something and then explain it. But this is the part that I think isn't going well, is the comms part of this, is exactly that. Like, to Kelvin's point, Kelvin's asked some pretty significant questions that farmers are going to need to know for the season ahead and for next year, and we don't have answers. So, they've got the photo up and they've made the announcement, and then it sort of just falls apart after that as to, like, the details, the rollout, the comms, all those sorts of things. So I'm not sure that this is, some sort of turning point for PMRA. Go ahead, Kelvin.
The provinces are celebrating it, and Pierre Poilievre and the opposition are celebrating it. I'm not even sure that the Liberal government that has actually made this decision has celebrated it. They didn't do a photo op. They just issued a statement from the ministers. And so it was like a late in the evening kind of, oh, by the way, we've made this decision that is significant for prairie farmers. And they haven't really communicated it well. And I'm not sure, we haven't mentioned the target species issue, which is massive around strychnine. Like, let's not pretend that there isn't an off-target species issue with strychnine if it's not used properly. So that is the concern, and I'm not sure whether there's backlash within the Liberal ranks or within Health Canada that against this. Maybe that's why they aren't communicating it better.
They don't want to own it.
Okay. Exactly.
Yeah,
that might be it.
And I think, like, to that end, though, like, this is, to me, and maybe this is me expecting grown-up conversations about complicated issues, which I know, how dare I? Yeah, exactly. Do not do such things. But, like, should we not, we recognize that if you're putting out, a poison to a mammal, et cetera, exactly that, we have to think about the environment that they're in. We have to think about off-target. Like, if we are spraying herbicides, we think about drift. We'd use different nozzles. We think about downstream effects, like, all of those things. Have we been working on that for the gopher issue? Like, I feel like maybe that's what the government should have been doing in this time, that they've, again, removing a tool and then telling everybody, hey, just deal with it. It's like, shouldn't we also then in tandem be trying to solve this problem in maybe other ways, as far as, limiting that exposure or building a better mousetrap? Those sorts of things. And so to me, that's a failing of not seeing things as a broader issue. And that's a failing of, say, PMRA or even our provincial organizations, let's say, when they yoink a tool and there are no alternatives or no good alternatives, to Sean's point about the creative ways you can get rid of Richardson ground squirrels. Where's the work then that's been done on trying to either limit the damage that they do or limit the exposure to off-target species? Like, show me the work, everybody, because that should have been going on.
What dialect is saying yoink over yank?
Oh, good question. And the kids these days, they say things like yeet. Like, when you throw something, you yeet it. I really like that one. I adopted that one from the youth. From the youth.
Youths.
Yeah. I don't know. Yoink is more fun.
Okay.
But is there
I think you make a good, picking up all the carcasses of these.
Right. Have a good time with that in the heat of the summer.
Used to send the kids out to pick rocks. Now we're just going to send them out to pick up squirrels.
And do you have to bring the whole squirrel, or can it just be the tail? Because sometimes, right? Like,
well, and remember, this is roadkill we should not eat because we poisoned it.
Everyone.
So for all you people that get a little hungry out there. Hey, with deep roots in agriculture, MMP's Ag Risk Management team helps producers protect their bottom line through smart, proactive risk planning. From AgriStability and AgriInvest to tailored private insurance strategies, MMP's Ag Risk advisors simplify complex problems and build customized plans that fit your farm. Strengthen your operation with confidence. Connect with MMP today at mmp.ca. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, Sean Haney, RealAg Issues Panel, back right after this quick break.
Until you've used Viatude fungicide, you'll never know what your canola crop is capable of. Engineered excellence in every jug, Viatude combines two powerful actives, Group 11 and 3, for best-in-class sclerotinia protection and superior resistance management by penetrating the plant and protecting against infection. Treat your canola crop to a healthy and productive season with Viatude. Ask your local retailer for more information.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Hey, we're looking for new builds for shops. Like really cool stuff. It could be actually be retrofits too. Like maybe you did like a big reno and you're excited about it. We will look at all shapes and sizes of shops. Just we want interesting stories and cool designs and stuff that you are proud of. And I know you are proud of that shop that you worked on because you love being in there all of the winter season. Be a new episode of RealAg Shops by sending me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. All of our listeners in Canada and the U.S., we want to hear from you. Okay, let's keep rolling here with the RealAg Issues Panel here on RealAg Radio. And Lyndsey, last Friday, big news, great news. If you are a grower of canola, and there is north of 21 million acres expected in 2026. A lot of that will probably be exported as oil to the United States. And Friday's news on the 26-27 RVOs that came out from the EPA were very good news for canola.
So, and I will tell you that late on a Friday, my brain is a little bit tired. And so hats off to Kelvin and Sean. Thank you to you for explaining all this to me. So if audience member, you are as sort of overwhelmed by all of this information as me. You're in good company. There is a lot to unpack on this one. And sometimes, to me, I always think about, okay, is this good news for canola? And yes, Friday was good news for canola. Then is this good news for Canadian ethanol? That one's maybe a question. We've talked on this show about the RIN haircut. We've written about this. We've done interviews about it, etc. That was delayed to 2028, right? Yep. I'm correct? Yep. Like there are a lot of moving parts to this. So it is a lot to unpack, but ultimately we have to remember here in Canada, so much of our canola market is impacted by what the U.S. does on its biofuel policy, and what that means for Canadian canola demand, and price, of course. And then, of course, we're also on the other side, on the ethanol side, and Sean, great conversation with Deb Conlon just a few weeks ago about, Canadian ethanol producers, so corn, wheat, whatever that might be, having to compete in a space with, U.S. ethanol stocks. So there's a lot on the biofuel side that's moving and shaking here, and trying to translate that into what it means for the Canadian grower and or Canadian markets. To me, like on the canola side, looks like a clear win, and Kelvin can maybe unpack some of that. On the ethanol side, I still have questions on, because from the Ontario perspective, it feels like Canada's policies aren't necessarily keeping pace. And so exactly that, we've got U.S. ethanol and or U.S. crops coming in to feed the ethanol side. And I don't know that we're really supporting it in Canada to the same extent. So I have questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern from the Canadian ethanol industry. And Friday's news doesn't, it's kind of an indirect thing. The concern is that ECCC is not moving fast enough on these amendments. And one of the requests from the ethanol industry in Canada on these CFR amendments is that they want to have a domestic use component. Right. So there would be an amount that would have to come from Canadian feedstocks. And fully accepting that in order for Canada to meet its targets under the CFR, Canada needs American ethanol and will continue to be the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. That's probably not going to change. What they're trying to prevent is 100% of the ethanol being used in Canada being from the U.S. So that's the rub there, is the fact that Canada is not moving fast enough. There's a shocker for you. Like, we haven't heard that before. On the canola side, related to last week's 26-27 RVO announcement from EPA, record bio-based diesel numbers when it comes to the RVOs, and like you said, the pushback of those to 2028 on the potential for a RIN haircut. Some would say there's still time to even change that, so that's being pushed to 2028. So a Canadian feedstock, Canadian canola, will have the same RIN value as, say, canola in North Dakota. So there is that, which is a huge positive. This on top of already where Canadian feedstocks are considered domestic feedstocks under the 45Z program. So I think like two thumbs up, here's a really good trailing, Kelvin, thread, I should say, of really good news when it comes to the biofuel front.
Yeah, for, like you said, for growers of canola, also soybeans, and that would include soybean growers in Ontario. This is massive biofuel demand that has been created here by the U.S. government, or continues to be created and now at record high levels. The RIN haircut, the wording, when you actually look at what the Environmental Protection Agency text says, there's a lot of flexibility there. That 2028 timeline, it says by that year or sometime thereafter, I believe is the exact text. So it's not a firm commitment to implementing that 50% cut to the credit for imported feedstocks or imported fuels by 2028 either. It's not a firm commitment at this point. So yeah, it is really a tale of two very different stories, as Lyndsey alluded to, where positive demand on the oilseed side of things, great news if you're a grower of those, but on the domestic ethanol production side of things, certainly this further raises concerns about whether the playing field is quite uneven here between an ethanol producer in Ontario versus ethanol, or in Manitoba, or to go even further, or an ethanol producer in Michigan or the Midwest U.S. So that's where the expectation coming out of this is that we will continue to see, unless the clean fuel regulations here in Canada are changed, we will continue to see ethanol flood north into the Canadian market. And that's certainly something that could also be part of the discussions around USMCA CUSMA talks here in the coming months as well. That will be a factor and potentially an irritant if one of the countries acts in a certain way. There could be brought up as an issue in those negotiations too.
Yeah, Canada's got the negotiators got to play that one smartly, in the fact that a domestic use component is probably not going to change the fact that Canada will still be the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. I think that's an important point they're going to have to continually, because when you first hear domestic use, wait a minute, we treated you quite well when it came to 45Z and the RIN haircut. Now what are you doing? It's the actual domestic the domestic use component they're talking about is actually actually relatively low. We do not have 90 million acres of corn running around the fields around Ontario or the rest of Canada. So it is a much different sized crop, and more like in the ballpark of how big the canola crop is in the US, right? And so it's kind of interesting how those things reverse. This news is all from last week on canola is also good for the canola grower in the northern tier, because the Canadian canola having the same RIN value gives the American canola crop scale. It goes from like 2.6 million acres in the U.S. for 26 to 20 million plus. And so when it comes to making canola, a viable supplier to some of those crush plants, the Canadian canola crop gives that American crop some scale. So I think it's good news for growers on the U.S. side of the border as well. When we come back, we're going to talk more on the RealAg Issues Panel. I think we're going to dip into some trade. There's a Globe and Mail story that says Canada is really being left a little bit in the cold here when it comes to the trade negotiations with the U.S. compared to Mexico. We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lallemand Plant Care.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. This segment's brought to you by Field Heroes. Powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Whether you're a farmer, researcher, or educator, visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can work for you. Work for you for free. Right, Lyndsey? Lyndsey, I saw you on an Instagram reel. You had the environment minister to your solar site. And there was one of the clips they posted, you sounded like you could have been like an entomologist on the Pest and Predator podcast.
Well, thank you. That is like super high praise. I will state two things. It was heavily edited. And so they did take, I said all those things and probably in that order, but they did snip them all together to make it sound like it was one continuous discussion on insects. But I will say, as a livestock producer who, does use grazing exclusively to feed, our flock, you get very familiar with the insects in the field. Especially there's one point in the summer where the orb weaver spiders are like everywhere. And as you walk between the panels when you're doing fencing, they then hop onto your helmet and into your face, and they're very large. And I get a little overwhelmed. They just surprise me a little.
Gives you a little bit of a shiver?
A little bit. They're very large. Super pretty. But like I would prefer that they not be on my helmet.
But it'd be like warm, fuzzy feelings if you were a true entomologist, right?
Exactly. So that's how you know I'm a fake.
Maybe you have
failed. Yeah. You have failed.
Yeah. And I also don't want bees or wasps to sting me. So, for the greater good of filming it or something. So I'm not a true entomologist at all. I do find them fascinating though. But
yeah, you're
entomologists or bugs?
Both, I guess. Yeah. Entomologists are great. They are like some of the most fascinating researchers you will ever meet, which is why I love the Pest and Predators podcast, because Sean gets to talk to them all and then we get to listen. So it's great.
It has been fun.
Yeah.
Like I've really enjoyed that series because there's cool personalities and stories. And I also have deep respect for the focus and commitment to be like locked in on Lygus bug for an entire career.
Insect. Yeah.
I can't stay focused here to talk about one thing for like a segment.
Speaking of, we're running out of time, but I do want to just quickly, I will say entomologists, when they come on the Agronomists on Monday nights, consistently have the best t-shirts as well. Because they often have very on-brand t-shirts. So, yes, also that.
Absolutely. Okay, let's keep going here. There's a story in the Globe and Mail, and it's continuing this vibe or this positioning that Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. have this CUSMA USMCA review that is happening here in the summer. It's kind of already underway. The article actually points out what exactly is that July 1st date. It's a good point. But this is all underway. There is a lot of like what could happen and speculation on the different directions this is all going. But the article really continues this narrative, Kelvin, that the U.S. and Mexico are deep into talks, and Canada is sort of talking, but not that serious, and kind of like a little bit on the sidelines. What's your is that your perspective? Is that the way you see it?
This is a narrative that we've been hearing going back already a year when we were in the heat of Liberation Day tariffs and that type of thing, and the exemptions for. Mexico got an exemption a few days before Canada did, and there was talk, and it's been emanating from D.C. It seems like since then that Mexico is doing a better job of navigating the Trump administration than Canada is. I'm not totally convinced. Sure, they maybe have some more formal technical negotiations and meetings happening. It sounds like Mexico has invested a lot in having its people on the ground in D.C. Canada, maybe it's been a bit more intermittent, where Dominic LeBlanc has been flying in and out every couple of weeks. We now have a chief negotiator and a new ambassador. So there's people on the ground now that are having regular meetings. I'm just not sure that it matters in the end, though, because the goal of this trade negotiation for each of the three countries' governments is the best possible standard of living for the nation's citizens. It's not a good job ribbon or a trophy from the U.S. administration or Congress or media in D.C. That's not the goal here. So I'm not sure it matters if if there's perception of more formal talks happening between Mexico and the U.S. than between Canada. I'm not saying that that's any indication or assessment that Canada is doing a poor job of navigating. If we go back to the last USMCA negotiation, U.S. and Mexico kind of came to that deal, and Canada joined on at the last second. Is another way that was framed, and so maybe we're seeing the same thing here. And when you look at the issues list, and we saw U.S. Trade Representative's office release their annual report on trade issues with countries around the world. there are a lot more serious issues between the U.S. and Mexico, I would say, when you look at the immigration side of things and labor side of things, as well as in the manufacturing sector too, and relationship with China, than there is with the U.S. and Canada. I think there's still more alignment between the U.S. and Canada on some things, and so there's room for more progress on the U.S.-Mexico relationship than there is in a lot of places where Canada and the U.S. are already more aligned.
Yeah. So there was a quote here from Antonio Ortiz Mina, a professor at Georgetown University and former head of economic affairs at Mexico's embassy in Washington. He was quoted in the article as saying, however, actual U.S. policies towards both countries have been virtually the same, pointing to similar levels of tariffs on both countries. That on the at 100,000 feet, Lyndsey, that I think is really accurate. Although the words used or the order of operations, they are different. The outcome has really been the same. Both countries are really, at this point, factually in the same position.
Well, and so this is where, yes. And so this is where it's like you sort of wonder, is it someone from, a newspaper's perspective or a media's perspective, if you're on that file, is it that you have to write about something so you continue to, in that realistically, we have to focus on the outcome here. And to Kelvin's point, there are trade irritants between Canada and the U.S. in the USMCA CUSMA deal. Those will have to be addressed, are being addressed. This is the other thing, exactly that. We have people that are working behind the scenes that are on the ground that aren't going to make a big deal out of it. I listened to one report, I think last week, about just how private and behind the scenes some of these conversations can be. We don't make a big deal out of it for good reason. These are supposed to be meetings, negotiations, confidential, etc. Ultimately, the list of irritants or things to work out, and I mean, Greer talked about this weeks ago about how, there are going to be aspects of this deal that are going to look different between Canada and Mexico and are going to look different between US and Mexico and et cetera. They have things they need to work out. Canada or Mexico and the US, and then we've got things that we need to work out, just like, Canada's going to talk to Mexico. So realistically, it does feel a little bit like trying to maybe drum up some controversy where it doesn't maybe need to exist. I'm confident that Canada is actually still having meetings and working through this negotiation. Would we like to maybe know more about it or when they happen? Sure, I'd love that. More transparency is a great thing. But this is an incredibly large undertaking. And ultimately, without knowing, the play-by-play of what happens, we have to judge it by outcomes. And Sean, to your point, outcomes-based, we're not doing, much worse or much better off than the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. So if we have to judge it by something, I would say that, whatever is going on is probably working to the extent that it can. But, if anybody wants to let us know all the meetings that are happening and wants to share that, we'd be totally open to it. Please do. But in the absence of that, I'm not worried that somehow Canada is being shut out.
There's a quote here from gentleman who is he was a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington, said Mexico is doubling down on integration with the U.S., trying to reduce the reliance on Asian manufacturing so they can produce more in Mexico and they can export more to the U.S. And his point was, I don't think Canada is willing to let go of the U.S. market, but they're putting some human capital and time into trying to increase their ties with other economies, including China, America's chief geopolitical rival. So there's that. And this gets back to some of the administration's concerns about what Carney actually agreed to with China. That is a certain thread to pull on. I'm curious if what's driving this is Canada's strategy to slow play. Now, Canada's slow in negotiations, period, typically, culturally, when it comes to it's not exactly a fast process. And I'm wondering if that, even increased deliberate slow play to draw it out is creating some frustration. Now, some could say that's a strategic.
What's wrong with?
No, I'm not. No, it's going to be finished.
What's wrong with if you're in negotiations and the party across the table is frustrated with you, that's no assessment of what your outcome is. Like, that's not a good assessment of whether
you're judging what my position was there. Actually, I'm saying that could be determined to be good or bad, depending on which side that you're on. See what he's trying to do to me?
And I also don't understand that comment about Mexico focusing more on integrating with the U.S. BYD, the big Chinese car manufacturing plant, has significant operations in Mexico, not in Canada. There's all kinds of Chinese companies that have established massive operations already in Mexico, not in Canada. So to me, that framing is also not accurate in terms of that's the direction. Maybe Mexico's saying, hang on, we got to slow this down, Chinese investment in our country, because we want to stay integrated with the U.S. But Canada hasn't gone that far. And so to me, that's where some of the descriptions and narrative around this don't reflect reality on a lot of this.
Yeah. The one thing that was in the USTR trade report, which I thought was interesting, a continued mention of the wine, beer, and spirits lack of trade. I've said repeatedly on different U.S. media programs that is completely based on the 51st state stuff. The president, he created that problem himself. That's what that reaction has been. I'm not sure how they're going to fix that. The other one that stuck out to me was the mentioning of the Canadian variety registration system and the fact that it is, and I'm having a hard time finding the exact language that they used, but essentially
it's a 600-page document, everybody.
Yeah.
It's
basically, it's very difficult to get varieties registered in the Canadian market, thick and slow, and those. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but and there's people in Canada that would share that same acknowledgement, and some people in Canada would say, hey, there's a high bar, and there's that high bar is there for a reason. We'll see. That's going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out, to be honest with you. But anything else stick out in that document, Kelvin?
To me, a lot of it was the old familiar stuff when it comes to supply management in dairy, and like you said, the variety registration system. And going back to Mexico, I'm maybe overstating the presence of Chinese factories in Mexico. A lot of that is investment that they're looking to make, but it's still, to me, there's, and we should also comb through the Mexico list when it comes to this negotiation. To me, there is. A lot of these are long-standing, but not major issues. Of course, province is banning U.S. alcohol continues to be a thorn in the U.S. administration's side, which somehow I'm always amazed at how big a deal that is, and maybe that's the populist politics of today that makes it so, and also the key areas of the U.S. where those products are produced, but that's also on the list here, and a significant one that I think could easily be resolved if relationship is repaired. I would see the provincial alcohol boards, liquor boards, having issue putting that bourbon back on the shelf, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's easier to solve when it comes to some of the spirits and the things like bourbon. I think my perception has been harder on the wine front, because it is so geographically based. I think, talking to some people that do import of alcohol, as that's their company. That's a concern I hear from them. Is it's going to take longer for the wine industry to recover. Okay, one thing is when you do a RealAg Issues panel on a Wednesday, the time flies, and we are out of it. But we've got good news. We're going to have a quick bonus as well for those of you that are RealAg Radio podcast listeners. All the best to Kelvin and Lyndsey. Blue Jays are 4-1. Let's keep her rolling, baby. Send me your feedback, Haney at RealAgriculture.com, or you can call or text the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer today.
Okay, welcome to the bonus here of RealAg Radio. We kind of clipped Kelvin there. I'm curious what he was going to say. But thanks a lot for tuning in, everybody, and hope you're having yourself a great April 1st. Be careful. Keep your head up out there. Some people don't like to follow that rule of before noon. There's also the time zone effect, where if you're in the mountain time zone, your buddies in the east, you can be conscious that there's some real trickery out there on a day like April 1st. So thanks a lot for tuning in and downloading the RealAg Radio podcast. We very much appreciate it. Lyndsey, what did we not cover here today on the show?
Oh, there's a few things. I was going to note, I was scrolling Instagram there, and it looks like the Leafs have a new GM here for April 1st on the Spit and Chicklets.
Rad Tree Living.
Yeah.
Out.
So anyway, out. Which that is not my what we didn't talk about, because that would be Kelvin's, obviously.
But you know what? Based on his performance,
no,
I think they've been term.
No, it's an April Fool's.
Oh,
is that
there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Based on how well Tree Living's done in Calgary and then in Toronto, he's gonna be working at his dad's Boston Pizzas here before he'll be working out of the back kitchen in Virden, Manitoba, at the original Boston Pizza.
Right. I do want to note the Vegas Golden Knights hiring Tortorello. Yeah. I did not have that on my bingo card. So there you go. Okay. What didn't we talk about? Oh, it's a shout out. You'll hear more about it on Friday's show. But we did get word from CCA, so the Canadian Cattle Association, that they have publicly stated that
we didn't talk about this.
Yeah, we didn't, but that's okay. You'll hear more about it on Friday. That they have officially said that they do not support the proposed changes by CFIA, as they were moving through. So these have been gazetted, and then of course there was all sorts of public outcry. It's a really interesting conversation. I asked Tyler Fulton, the president, sort of how they came to this and that sort of stuff. But the more interesting thing to me is what happens now, in that, these rules and regulations, these proposed changes, yes, they were gazetted, but they didn't finish the process to actually becoming the rules and the regulations and the implementation phase. So they could just be dead in the water, right? They could just not do anything. But it's CFIA that makes that call. It's the government that makes that call. It's not any of the producer groups. And the producer groups have basically all come out and said they don't support these. We had some pushback on the sheep side as well. But CFIA could, quite honestly, still continue forward with these, if they wanted to, or they might walk some of them back. They might abandon ship entirely. So that, I think, will be the more interesting thing to watch, is that even the industry can say they don't support them. It's not the industry that decides, nor the ones that enforce it. So ultimately, on the traceability side, sure, the producer group saying they don't support the changes is a significant pushback, but we have yet to find out what CFIA actually plans to do.
If they proceed as is, with major producer groups saying, now, you know what, we've heard from the grassroots, we are not on with these changes in support.
Yep.
You've really, I guess, thrown the idea of producer input under the bus. So you got producer input from a consultation perspective. The producer groups, not just producer groups have said, we're not in support. And how we got here is that is a component of it, but not at this point, not in support. How do you go forward? Talk about the industry is going to lose their minds.
Okay. And this is a really important point, and I kind of wish we could, make sure that everybody knows this. If you go back to the original submissions in the comment period, which were over 2 years ago, the producer groups did push back against the proposed changes then. And CFIA still went ahead with them unchanged and gazetted them. And that's how we got here.
Makes it worse.
So it makes it worse. So realistically, CFIA has already gone against what industry told them they supported. So now, at this juncture, but there is another level here in that this is now becoming actual enforceable law. If after all of this pushback they still continue, it's already a PR mess, but it's even more so. It would be an absolute disaster. So yeah.
Kelvin, any thoughts?
Well, to me, CFIA has done a poor job explaining why these changes are needed. They have not got bought in, and if they push it ahead continue to do that, again, like you said, Sean, it'll be a disaster in terms of implementation and enforcement and backlash, and it'll become a political hot potato, and ultimately politicians will probably be forced under pressure from voters to repeal it and roll it back. So I'm curious why CFIA is so adamant in making these changes. What is driving the impetus to make these changes, and why we haven't heard a better explanation of that, or why that hasn't been communicated more clearly? Yeah,
new CEO of CCA, Andrea Brocklebank, when I talked to her at NCBA at CattleCon, that was one of my questions, is like, I think we're still missing the sell job on the incremental changes to traceability and the value proposition and what the opportunity cost is if we don't do it. Yeah. That part that story has really not been told, and it's just been kind of left in the ether, and it's spiraled in a whole bunch of different directions as we've seen and your worst imagination can express. And here we are. And so I do think going forward, and there's numerous examples here where we're looking at some sort of rules change, regulatory change, however you want to phrase that, and a government department is responsible for it, but they don't actually take ownership and communications leadership on it and push it down to the farm groups and almost like use them as a shield to take all the shrapnel that is expressed in pushback, and then people think it's that producer group that's the one that's forcing the change, causing the change, responsible for the decision making. And I just don't know if I think that's not a successful strategy, even if the change would be a positive one, and I don't know if it is in this case. But anyway, Lyndsey, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it also erodes sort of the confidence and the support and at the ground level, exactly that. It erodes all of that sort of confidence in like what is, let's say, our government doing, or more so down the line, exactly that of the groups that end up having to actually roll out these programs. And this is the other thing, is that there is a lot of also a misunderstanding of like who actually decides these and who enforces them, et cetera. And like the producer groups, the checkoff orgs, get a lot of flack for it, but realistically, they're not the organization that's actually in charge of communication and enforcement of this. We have things like CCIA, and for sheep, it's the CSIP program. These are actually the groups that are tasked with communication to all the membership and collecting some of this information, et cetera. And that just exactly that. It just sort of rolls down. And I don't see, to your point, Sean, where the actual government department that has made these rules and will enforce them. And so, and like from the producer perspective, like as a livestock producer, I have to follow the rules. I have to A, know what the rules are, and B, abide by them. And there are very real consequences if I do not. There are fines. There are all sorts of other things that I might be on the hook for if I don't follow the rules. At the same time, at this point, it's sort of basically up to me to go out and find what those rules actually are, because we haven't seen an actual communication of all these changes and these rules, as evidenced by this entire mess, is that clearly the comms of all of it has been absolutely just completely a flop. And so that continues on to the implementation phase of what's on the books right now. Well, never mind changes. That's what's on the books right now. Producers still are essentially left to their own devices to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, with very real consequences if we don't, by the way.
Yeah, but if you look at this situation, you look at seed regulatory changes, the VUA discussion, like there is a pattern here of how we are doing this as government, industry, producers. It's not working. Like new strategy needed,
please.
Required, please. Somebody take ownership of it.
Leadership.
What's that?
It requires leadership. It requires leadership, and we have a good column from Cam Dahl at Manitoba Pork up posted this week on Real Agriculture too on that topic.
Yep.
What did he say?
He wasn't necessarily specifically talking about this, but saying that we need to be united and come together and stop our infighting and stop that kind of thing. I don't want to put words in his mouth. People should read it, but to me, you need, in situations like this, you need people to convince everyone else to follow. You need to take the step forward and convince other people to follow. In all those examples you cited there, Sean. And right now we have ideas being thrown at the wall, and then we get stuck because nobody does makes that pitch that this is where we need to go because of the opportunity cost of staying in the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hey, what will happen first, Kelvin? Leafs winning the Stanley Cup or Canada completing the Grade Act review?
The former, the first. Sure.
This is our new poll post. Is right here.
There's no way the Grade Act review is done by next June. So
there's no way.
I will be long retired. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
on the Grade Act or the Leafs?
The Grade, well, both.
Oh, both. Yeah. Sorry, Kelvin, but not sorry. Yeah. That's okay. That's our next poll.
Kelvin, what did we not discuss this week?
Oh, I actually have a good one here. Oh. Shout out to Jeremy Hansen from Farm Kid from Ailsa Craig, Ontario, headed for a ride around the moon later today, hopefully, or taking off later today. The first non-American into outer space as part of the Artemis 2 mission with NASA. And so, cool that a kid from rural Ontario could have this opportunity, and also shows that in the big picture, there's still a lot of cooperation and working together and for the greater good that our society is still capable of.
Ailsa Craig, he's from Ailsa Craig.
He's from Ailsa Craig. Yep. The mainstream media says he's from London, but that's
no.
We all know he's not from London.
Also, the home of Steve Treinstra.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Ailsa Craig. Yeah. I want to say, yes. So hopefully that does actually go. I think that the window tonight is around 6:30 Eastern. But over the next 2 weeks, there's several if it doesn't go tonight. I will say I did listen to an interview, that Hansen did, I don't know, probably a couple months ago now. He is incredibly well spoken and has such a cool, outlook on why he's doing this and what it means for humanity and his sort of take on things. But all of that to say is that I think space is a myth. So anyway, he's allegedly going to space.
Okay, so they're going to space, but they're not landing on the moon, correct?
That's right. They're going around the moon, but not all the way around. They're
we still haven't
basically
landed
sort
on
of
it, so we're still
they're going. Yeah, they're
I'm kidding.
Anyway,
I'm kidding.
I'm so glad this is the bonus. I don't want people to think I'm some. Anyway, allegedly going around the moon, but not all the way around, just to the dark side and coming back.
You know what, Kelvin? Based on early performances from Brandon Little in the Blue Jays bullpen, I wish they would take Brandon Little with them.
I don't know if we can say that. Yeah, it's.
I think
it's the bonus. We can say whatever we want.
You assume that I would drop him off. I was just saying, take him with.
Take him, distract him.
Bring him back, Kelvin.
Bring him back, and he'll have some otherworldly bullpen arm. Yeah, exactly.
From the zero gravity shift.
Look at the assumptions that Kelvin has been making today on what I actually mean.
It's because he's back in his telling Sean when he's wrong phase. His new era.
He thought I meant to kick him off at the spaceship. Now, if that happened, would
you be sad? I don't know.
Always got to pick it up here. That is very cool.
It is
honestly, it is very cool to see that. That is one of the smart kids in school. What have the rest of us done with our lives when he was in space camp, right? Winning all those first prizes probably in the science fair, and people like me that were playing baseball and hockey are like, look at that guy.
Yeah.
Now
There's got to be something in the water in Southern Ontario, though, because Chris Hadfield's from Sarnia. So I don't know what's going on down there, guys, but hats off to you. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Okay.
I'm curious, do you think that we'll ever see farming in space? Like that
movie with Matt Damon on Mars?
Is that what that one's about?
Yeah, have you not seen
that?
Yeah,
he grows potatoes.
Yeah, he grows potatoes to feed himself.
Haven't seen it.
Well, it's actually a lot for me to watch a movie like that because I actually get seriously
you don't like space.
About the lack of oxygen. It terrifies me. It's the lack of oxygen. I need to be able to breathe. I also don't like deep sea stuff. Nope, I'm out.
So I've often thought about that.
That movie was called The Martian, Sean. It was a good movie.
It is.
He grew potatoes, but we did actually at the time. Is that 10 years ago?
Yeah.
We did an article on how scientists actually said he should have grown beans instead of potatoes for nutrients the nutrient efficiency equation and that type of thing in terms of sustaining his health and also the resources available on Mars, that kind of thing, beans would have made more sense than potatoes.
Yeah. Once again, Hollywood gets farming wrong. This just...
Well, Field of Dreams, the greatest farming movie ever.
It's not a farming movie.
It's entirely based on the fact there's a corn crop. So
it's totally a farming movie.
Listen, farm profitability was a real challenge in the movie. Feels kind of like it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
was it ghosts? The ghost thing? That's cool though.
Oh,
anyway, okay.
Great.
Hang on.
Well, name me another farming movie. There isn't. There's a lot of ranching movies. Like Hollywood loves cattle.
Yeah, but less so about like farming.
Less farming.
Yeah.
You think there would be more farming?
Okay. Well, have at it.
Something to pay attention to before we wrap up is the fact that yesterday in a joint meeting between USDA Secretary Rollins and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, Secretary Rollins talked about her love of mandatory country of origin labeling, which I thought was kind of interesting. And not a real, there's a real surprise there. USDA has been hard out pushing this product of USA label. Secretary Rollins has meetings set up with food retailers, trying to engage them to push the product, and that voluntary product of USA label. I wonder if her comments about MCool are somewhat tied to what we've been hearing. There's been slow uptake in the use of the product of USA label, and if it's not going to happen voluntarily, would the administration, talk about throwing a wrench in the USMCA negotiations. That would be a wrench, Kelvin.
And another contradiction in terms of also having an affordability agenda, because
bad timing.
We're mandatory, affordability is going to be a challenge.
I don't know. I think it's to me, it's like, let's say it's, there hasn't been a ton of uptake, or there won't be. So then we want to make it mandatory. Like, what is the end game there? Like, what are we trying to actually achieve? Because exactly that, are we trying to make things more affordable? Because that's not going to get you there. I do think it probably does, though, show where the influence is coming from. We are seeing a lot of like the regen space and the grazing space and, and all that sort of stuff where Rollins is like totally on side and really promoting that. I would think then if you follow that stream down, you're going to find a lot of people that exactly that to them making product of USA, mandatory, is in their view better for them, and therefore that's what they're pushing for, and Rollins is eating it up. And we recognize how problematic it is for the cattle industry and the beef industry and for affordability, and it will just create a gigantic administrative and diplomatic headache. So
yeah,
we'll see.
She had said, it was in, I'm paraphrasing, it was in the spirit of transparency.
To make it mandatory?
Yeah, that people know where their food comes from. But so sure, but I think the point is the bad timing. I had the exact same thought in terms of like, this is counterproductive to the affordability argument. Again, it's not matching up, but it does show very much there is influential voices in the secretary's ear coming from more of that, organizations like an RCAF, for example.
Yes.
Because this is a strong position that they would have, and it's clear that they have some influence over some of the other organizations, like, not to say the NCBA doesn't have influence, they do, but this is a big one when it comes to some of the ranching sector in some of the states for sure. So we'll have to see. It doesn't mean it's going to become the big push. There's lots of things to be worked out. That creates a whole nother tailspin of ramifications, but we'll have to see how far that goes and if it becomes a priority for the president. I think it's one of the most important. She can say it's important to her, and she believes in it. The question is, does the guy sitting in the Oval Office? If you have any feedback on today's show, because we're out of time for the bonus, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Keep the feedback coming. Really do appreciate that. And tomorrow, Farmer Rapid Fire. And then Friday, Good Friday, we will have a new show with some great interviews that our team has put together. So we will have a new show on Friday, just will not be Issues Panel because of Good Friday. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Cheers, everybody.